afternoon. Is this not an amazing afternoon or morning so far? Who's having a great time? Come on. Who's ready to change some lives? Come on, I want to hear it. All right, we got a lot of work to do, but we can do it. So let's get down to the brass knuckles. What do you say? All right, so I chose that song Love's the Only Rule, because you gotta love Bon Jovi, right? Who doesn't love Bon Jovi? But chiropractic is an absolute love of mine. It's a lifestyle, it's a relationship, it is what changed my life. It's what saved my life. So I want to share with you today the epigenetic effects of subluxation. And I profoundly mean the epigenetic effects from development to disease. So let's party on. Gotta get the right button here. Okay. So the neurobiology, in neuroscience now, we're looking at the neurobiology of disease. And we look at that in regards to physical health, but also mental health. We know now that physical health or mental health is actually a neurophysiological compromise, right? And that's from the neuropsychiatric establishment. So sadly, just 2 weeks ago in this country, we had another several mass casualties. So I get asked all the time, what's going on, Doc? What's going on in our world? Do you know that 1 in 5 children in this country is said to have a mental disorder? You grasp that? 1 in 5 children in the United States is said to have a mental disorder. 1 in 6 is said to have a neurodevelopmental disorder. 1 in 45-ish, depending on who you read, is said to have autism. And by 2025, Alzheimer's is said to increase by 40%. That's not okay. Is it okay with you guys? Okay, it's not okay with me. And I see those kiddos and those adults in my office every day. So what's going on? We look at now, our neuroscience is leading us to areas that are so profound. And we know that there's the developmental neuroplasticity. That occurs in utero and especially in the first couple years of life. Developmental neuroplasticity has a couple different segues to it than adult neuroplasticity. And with developmental neuroplasticity, we have windows, we have critical windows of time. We call them critical windows of opportunity. And then there's sensitive periods of opportunity. That means that we have to have the right input to the brain during fetal development and those first couple years that lays the groundwork for our overall health for the rest of our lives. Get that? So within the first 2 years, from fetal development and the first 2 years postnatally, developmental neuroplastic changes need to occur to lay the foundation for our health and well-being for the rest of our lives, especially mental health. That means that that brain needs proper input in utero and those key critical windows of time of development in those first 2 years. So what we want to look for is what goes wrong. When might those insults occur? We look at the 3 W's in regards to neurodevelopmental biology or neurobiology of disease. When might the insult have occurred? Especially in those early years. What might have been that insult? In today's world, we need to look at traumas, toxins, thoughts, and technology. We know that technology now is altering brain development and brain function. So what might be the toxic load that occurs, and where in the nervous system might it leave its insult? So it's very important that pregnant mothers are under chiropractic care. Because we also know through epigenetic effects that the mother's stress resilience capacity, her ability for the nervous system to adapt under a stress load. We call pregnancy the stress test for the thyroid, by the way. Okay, pregnancy is a very huge stressor on the body. And mom has to have a properly functioning nervous system to be able to adapt, chronically adapt, and have that resilience to adapt to that stress in order for proper developmental neuroplasticity of the offspring. We know that moms that are too stressed out and in a sympathetic dominant state, that child will inherit her stress response. And BTW, by the way, we will actually inherit the stress response of all our ancestors going back to about 14 generations. So depending how they adapted to stress, our nervous system and our resiliency to stress will be affected by up to 14 generations back. The neurobiology of disease tells us that most diseases start at least 20 years before they get the label. Okay? So if I get the label of Alzheimer's or MS or whatever, that disease process has been going on at least 20 years before that point. The average age of first pregnancy in the United States is 28. So if we do the math, I know you guys are tired. You've been here all morning. You had lunch. I got to try to keep you awake before break. I'll try to do a little song and dance here. But if we do the math, and the first age of pregnancy is 28, and disease starts at least 20 years prior to that, what is the minimum age children should be getting adjusted in your office? At least 8 years old. But of course, we want to advocate way before then to lay those good foundations for developmental neuroplasticity. Developmental neuroplasticity is going to rely on, one thing it's going to rely on is proper movement within its environment. So if a baby's subluxated and doesn't go through those proper movement patterns, their plasticity is going to be altered, and that can lay the foundation for chronic disease down the road. This is all in the literature. I'm not making this up. The other thing we know is the microbiome of the mother and the microbiome of the baby. So I call it the mom and the mob. Microbiome of mom, microbiome of baby. Also plays a profound role in these critical windows of development. So we need to make sure that both mom and baby have a good microbiome. So I want you to keep that on your back brain burner as we now see where we as chiropractors fit into the development and the neurobiology of disease. You ready? Okay, a little bit of brain review. So brain development and brain function, it's kind of like a relationship. It's like going out and get a relationship. How many of you are single right now? Me single. How many of you are on the dating scene? Who's on the dating scene? Maybe we can make some matches right here. Okay? All right. So it's kind of like a relationship. When you're out there dating, you want to have that chemistry with somebody, right? It's about chemistry. Get that chemistry with somebody. And if you get that chemistry, then you want to make a connection, right? And that's what kind of keeps that relationship going in the beginning. But the longer you've been together and you've been in this relationship, communication is key. Because communication is what's going to help keep a healthy relationship, right? You with me? The brain's kind of the same way. It needs good chemistry, so it needs good neurotransmitters. It needs to have a network of connections. The brain's about a network. We no longer look at kind of single areas of the brain because it's all a network. So we have to have good chemistry, we have to have good connection, and then we have to constantly communicate. The brain has to constantly communicate with different regions. So we take the cerebellum. Those, especially when we look at those deep cervical posterior muscles and joints of the cervical spine, profound input into the sensory input into the cerebellum and to other areas of the brain. So we used to see the cerebellum, we used to talk him as the motor doer. He was the motor dude, okay? We look at him differently now. If we refer to it as a male, he can now multitask. Just kind of a pun there. But he no longer just can do one thing as being a motor doer, he can multitask. The cerebellum is now also related with emotion, cognition, social experiences, working memory. Kind of the things that sound familiar that the frontal lobe is responsible for executive functionings, right? You with me? So the cerebellum basically regulates the frontal lobe, puts the brakes on the frontal lobe. So we have to have good input into the cerebellum so he can do his job and regulate the frontal lobe. They need to talk to each other. The frontal lobe is our executive functioning dude. He's the CEO of our brain. He's responsible for our reasonable capacity, being rational, impulse control, initiating tasks, completing tasks, short-term memory, social cues, okay? He's the executive functioner. And he puts the brakes on the limbic system. The limbic system is our emotional center. We can get caught up in that emotional center because that's from which pretty much every way that we make decisions in life. We're emotional human beings. Have any of you guys tried to be reasonable or rational or reason with a significant other in the middle of a heated argument? Anybody try to do that? Try to reason with somebody in the middle of a heated argument? How well does that work? It doesn't work because they're stuck in limbic lock-in mode, though. They're stuck in limbic drive. So how do we fit in this paradigm? When the frontal lobe is flipped off, we can't be reasonable, we can't be rational, we don't have impulse control, we don't make good decisions in life. And some of those poor decisions might lead to things like poor judgment calls, as far as we might not have good social skills or want to interact with others. We might be sensory defensive. And when the world's too much for me and I can't cope anymore, and there's a gun sitting there next to my bed, I might make a poor decision. And that's what we're seeing on the rise in this country. Suicide rates have drastically increased in the last decade and a half, and I mean drastically. So what the hell's going on? How do we fit in this picture? Here's the scoop, guys. We have 5 sensory systems, okay? 5 sensory systems that come from the outside world. Smell, sound, vision, taste, touch. That comes from my outside world and it has to come in. It has to be regulated. It has to be controlled. The brain has to be able to process that information. And it can't be too much on my brain. But we have 3 nerve senses too that come from within our body. And this is where chiropractic can absolutely shine. We have vestibular, proprioception, and interoception, or neurovisceral information. It comes from within the body. If we have a subluxation, that input into our brain is dysregulated. It's a scrambled mess. It's chaos. And this dysregulation leads to sensory overload, a sensory overload drive. That information comes into the sensory portion of the thalamus and makes its way to the amygdala. I call the amygdala your fear monger. It is your rate limiting factor in life. It's withholding all of you back from reaching your ultimate dreams and your ultimate goals. Because here's the dealy-wop. If we have an experience, let's take the neurovisceral sensation, the interoception. Have any of you ever experienced a great loss in your life? Raise your hand. Okay? Where it's such a great loss that maybe even your heart hurts. You can feel your heart hurt. Or you're so nervous that you feel like you're going to throw up. Or you have indigestion and you're sitting here after lunch in close quarters with all your friends and you're afraid you're going to fart out loud. So all you can concentrate is that indigestion, right? Okay? These are visceral sensations. They're 80% vagal, that vagus nerve. And it comes into the brain, and if it's a bad experience, Our brain stores it as a memory. And it will hold us back and trap us in this fear monger, this amygdala. And this amygdala regulates our HPA axis. So we're constantly running from a tiger, whether the tiger is there or not. Our brain thinks the tiger is there. The amygdala scans your environment 4 times every second for threat. It's always on the lookout. Once we create this memory pattern, from that point on, for the rest of your life, anytime you remotely think of that incident, even if it's a perceived stressor, even if it's a perceived stress that's loaded down from your ancestors, your brain will go right into here, right into the limbic lock and load mode, right into the amygdala. And it's going to hold you back from taking those chances and moving beyond your fear. Your HPA axis cranks, you get chronic cortisol cranking out. Initially, cortisol is anti-inflammatory, but over time it becomes pro-inflammatory, especially for the brain. You get dysregulation of the ANS, and you can either be in a constant flight, fright, or freeze and dissociate response. Your freeze and dissociate response is just as bad as if you're running from the tiger. Because your freeze and dissociate response is where, like a turtle, you go inward. You want to hide. You want to hide from the danger. But that is rate limiting for you as well and for your patients, because you can be afraid to shine and show your true self. And if somebody just looks at you wrong, you're like, oh my gosh. Or if you just think you made a mistake, oh, no, I can't, I'm dumb, I can't do that. I'm less than. So our sensory world shapes who we are and how we respond in every manner for the rest of our lives. And if it's abnormal from the get-go, from in utero, or especially those first couple years of life, the rest of the life can be shaped upon being stuck right here. And you know what? The frontal lobe never comes on board, because the limbic lobe takes over. And you know what? The frontal lobe, and particularly visual processing, is one of the #1 studied areas in psychopathology, in schizophrenia, in depression and anxiety and mass shooters. Are you following me? Are you guys awake out there? 1 in 5 children in this country is said to have a mental disorder. They're out on the streets shooting each other up. We as chiropractors have an amazing capacity to alter and help regulate the tempo, the amount of sensory input coming into the brain. Our visceral organs, vaguely mediated. Vestibular and proprioception, particularly vast around spinal joints and paraspinal muscles, the muscle spindles. If we are subluxated, if we're living a life subluxated, we are going to be dysregulated with sensory input into the brain. And that leads to a dysregulated life, which now we know from neuroscience is the setting stone for mental and physical well-being. It is the setting stone for these chronic neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's and MS and Parkinson's and diabetes. Don't you see those numbers skyrocketing? And people ask you, why? What's going on, doc? It starts in the beginning. And we have the ability to lay down some of these tracks, some of these form healthy parts of brain function. It's huge. And it starts right here. It starts at the primitive level of the brain, these primitive reflexes that we're born with. The way that those get integrated properly is by proper movement. If we don't see a baby in tummy time and rolling over and on all fours, that is important. And BTW, by the way, in times of stress, trauma, toxins, thoughts, technology, these primitive reflexes can reemerge. And they wake up again, which is going to pull us right back into that primitive brain. And that's how you know when the frontal lobe goes offline. Because the frontal lobe keeps the brakes on the limbic system, on the primitive part of the brain. And then we work our way up to higher levels of brain function. But here's the deal. How many have heard the brain-gut-brain connection? Right? It's all over the place. You know, 15, 17 years ago, I started talking about the vagus nerve. And even within our profession, I got labeled as, oh God, that Buerger, she loves the vagus nerve. She's hooked on the vagus nerve. When you hear Buerger talk, she can talk about the vagus nerve. Okay. Do you know that it takes about 17 years for translational research to reach, to be accepted in the medical community? So research that we have, and it's predictable, it's repeated. It's like, wow, that's really a novel concept in the research world. It takes 17 years to be accepted in the medical paradigm, and then it's got to be accepted within the layperson's paradigm. And back in 1998 is when Kevin Tracy realized, he was a neurosurgeon, and he realized that the vagus nerve is your immune system. Okay? Up until that point, the medical community said, your nervous system is hardwired. That's one system, your immune system is another system, it's a soft wired, they don't mesh, they don't talk to each other. He did some research because he lost a patient that really, it was a young female, I believe a young teenage female patient, and he couldn't figure out why she didn't make it. And that started the whole process of vagus nerve, its importance, that it is really what the vagus nerve controls for the majority of your immune system. Okay? BTW, by the way, in utero, these windows of opportunity, these developmental windows of opportunity, I said start in utero, right? Fetal development. The autonomic nervous system has trajectories, it has steps. It has windows of development, critical periods of time that it's developing. The autonomic nervous system, i.e. vagal tone. And we know that it picks up speed, it really matures at the end of the second trimester and then to the third trimester of pregnancy. So it's critical that we have moms under care, because if her stress resiliency is down, it may lead to diminished capacity of that developmental trajectory of the autonomic nervous system, i.e. vagal tone. Baby enters this world already compromised. Okay? So, if I stay in the stress response mode, I'm going to be kicking out constant cortisol. I get a chronic inflammatory load on the brain, on the body, on the gut. We know the gut is the second brain. What happens is this gut barrier will chronically stay inflamed. And we've heard about gut permeability, gut dysbiosis, leaky gut syndrome. This is a strong connection. You can give them every probiotic in the world. You can take away gluten. Those are all good things. Those are all things that can support what we do as chiropractors to help take the stress load off of the system. But if we don't get them into a proper sensory motor protocol, we're going to be constantly swimming upstream. And this can continue to stay inflamed. An inflamed gut is an inflamed brain. An inflamed brain is an inflamed gut. An inflamed brain is going to alter sensory motor function. Altered sensory motor function is going to alter brain function. You with me? So as chiropractors, to know this information, to understand what you're doing when you're doing an adjustment, at any age and any stage in life, having that certainty, understanding that we are affecting brain function. You are blessed this evening to have Dr. Heidi Hovick, the queen of chiropractic in the brain, closing your night. You best be here to listen to what she has to say. Rock on, right? Okay? She's handing you a gift of understanding how chiropractic affects the brain. If you understand these models, there's no way you can go into your office on Monday and not understand what you're doing when you do an adjustment. Not having that certainty, not having that confidence, not knowing. We should have standing room only in our offices because it's so vital that we get proper input into the brain to have the healthiest, optimal chance of well-being for the rest of our lives. I'm not making this stuff up. Heidi's give you the hardcore science. We have a lot of the science, but what I'm asking you is, please, can we join together? Can we unite in a single message for the future of our profession on what it is we actually do? You know, time up, I'm almost done. If you want to learn more about the bigger picture, I don't have time to share it in 25 minutes. Go right here. It's a gift from me to you. You can listen to a bigger lecture, get more pieces to the puzzle, okay? Write it down, do it, listen to it. This is for our online private community members only, but I want you to listen to this. I want you to understand, okay? Everybody got that? Because it's important. I want you to understand that alone we can make a difference. All of us up on stage, alone we can make a difference. We can make a little niche. But together we stand, we can make a change. If we understand the message, if we believe in the message, if we understand just a little bit of the neuroscience, but if we have a united message, together we can make change. We can change lives, we can change the future, because you know what, damn it, they need us, and they need us now. Okay? I see too many people losing their life unnecessarily because they don't have a strong nervous system integrity. They don't have good cerebellar, limbic, frontal lobe communication. And it's got to stop. With you being here now, take this moment as a changing point for our profession. So if you're willing to do that, stand up. If you're willing to do that, stand up. Are you willing to put a united meshes together so the public knows what we're about? Who's willing to do that? All right, we need to do that. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so remember that when you go back to your communities. Listen to the rest of the speakers. Listen to Heidi. Know what you're talking about and know that chiropractic affects the brain. So for that, thank you for listening to me ramble on. And here I have a present for whoever wants to change some lives. Thank you.